Hey everyone. So today we're going to be looking at how to see the background of your spouse, how to see the conditions that were there, the environment that your spouse grew up in, right? How to see, was their childhood a good one? Did they experience a lot of pain? Were they in poverty growing up? Were they rich growing up? Right? So we're going to see these kind of things from the chart, right? So we know that the seventh house over here, this represents your spouse, right? This is essentially your spouse's lagna. So what we're going to do to see their childhood, we're going to look at fourth from the seventh house, which means we're going to be looking at the 10th house over here, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to look at all the planets that come into this 10th house, and we'll look at some different combinations that happen here in the 10th house. And through this, we're going to figure out the childhood and the background environments of your spouse, right? So over here, let's start off with something light, right? So let's start off with Venus here in the 10th house, right? So Venus in the 10th house, what this shows is that the spouse would have grown up in a very, it would have been a bit more of a rich neighborhood. This would have been a nice neighborhood. Uh, you'll see that they'll have like a lot more high-end grocery markets nearby. They'll have um They'll have, if you live in North America, you'll see that in during Halloween, these guys will always have like give out the best candy, right? Like they'll give out the full candy bars, right? Um, these you'll see the neighborhood will be very clean and very well maintained. So you'll see that these people they would have had a pretty nice and comfortable childhood. That's what you'll see. Like that's the word here with Venus in 10th house, that the spouse would have had a very comfortable childhood. They would have been very relaxed, not many pressures, not much stress, right? So they would have had a nice, easygoing childhood. Things would have come easily to them, right? So they would have been, uh, you'll see that growing up, anything that they would have asked their parents for, like the parents would have just gotten it for them, right? So it would have been very easy in that case, right? Very easy for them. They didn't have to struggle much for these things, right? You'll see that growing up, they would have had like a nice bed. They would have had good friends, like even their friends that they would have had, their friends' parents would have been very rich too, right? So all their friends would have been living like a comfortable lifestyle, right? Like they would live in a neighborhood where on the street you'll see that it's mostly just fancy cars, right? It's that kind of neighborhood. It's fancy, it's clean, well maintained. That's the type of neighborhood that this is, right? You'll even see in their neighborhood there would have been like a shopping mall nearby, right? A high-end shopping mall, or there would have been a place to get um like there would have been resources everywhere. Like this place wouldn't have been barren or it wouldn't have been like poor. Like this would have been everything. They would have had access to everything. Everything would have been at their disposal. So they would get things easily, right? So this is the type of neighborhood you would have a Venus in 10th, right? So let's see another light one, right? So Venus, let's go to Sun actually, right? So Sun over here, right? So growing up, your spouse here, he would have had to have been a lot more responsible for things growing up. Like here, he would have had to have taken care of himself. He would have had to like do his own chores. His parents would have told him things like, you know, you're growing up, you need to learn to do things around the house and you need to learn how to maintain these things. Right? So growing up, they would have been responsible and they would have gotten a lot of things done around the house, right? And it even got to a point where like even the parents would be out, they know how to, these people, they would have known how to take care of the house. They would have been perfectly fine. The parents would think, they would say that this person is very responsible. They would get things done. The parents don't need to worry about leaving their kid at home. That's these people, right? So it wasn't. as I wouldn't say it's as comfortable because with Venus they actually just got they could lay down in bed all day and have everything handed to them. Right? That's how their childhood. They would have had a great childhood, Venus in 10th, but Sun here makes them actually work a little bit more, right? These people, they didn't just sit down all day, right? Like you'll if you ask these people, they would say that growing up, their parents always gave them chores to do or tasks to do, right? Um, that's what you would have seen, right? The neighborhood also as well, they would have lived in a pretty good neighborhood, right? You'll see in their neighborhood, there would be some kind of government buildings nearby, or you would have seen in their neighborhood, there would have been people who worked for the government there, right? So that's what you would have seen in this neighborhood. It would have been a good neighborhood. It would be well maintained. It wouldn't be as luxurious as Venus is, but it would still be maintained well. You'll see that this there'll be a lot of government posters or signs around around here, right? Especially if the sun is in Magha Nakshatra, you'll see that they would have lived in a there'll be like a sign that says private property, do not trespass, right? That's what you'll see with sun, especially in Makkah there, right? I know it's very specific, right? But that's what you would have seen. Uh, that's what you'll see there, right? So their childhood, they did grow up pretty well. They also had all the resources, right? They grew up really well. They weren't poor, right? They had access to everything, right? Yeah. So that's sun. Let's move on to moon. So moon over here, what you'll see, here's the word for moon 10th house. You'll see your spouse. If you ask their parents will say, "Oh yeah, you're the this person lived like a queen, like a princess in the house. That this person, they always had to do everything for them, right? These people growing up." They didn't end up doing much hard work, and the only reason for that was because their parents would say, "Oh, he's just a princess. Let me do everything for them." Right? Is a queen princess, even if it's a male, right? Even if your spouse is a male, the parents would feel bad. They'd be like, "No, no, no, like don't work too hard. Here, let me get this for you." Right? That so that's the environment that the spouse would live in. They really didn't work so hard, right? Even if they tried to do work or they wanted to do anything on their own, like you'll see their parents would come in and they say, "Here, let me help you do it." And the parents would kind of just take over. And then these people, they would just they would just end up going to rest. You'll see even if anytime they try to do work, um, around the house growing up, you'll see the parents will be like, "Oh, here, let me sweep the kitchen. Let me mop it for you instead." And then here, the parents will give them food. They say, "Okay, here, go. You could go get some ice cream from the fridge. Here, go relax, right? You don't need to work hard." So you'll see these people were treated literally like a princess, like royalty, right? Right? It's a little different than the sun, right? The sun's royalty was different, where they still had responsibilities, but the queen gets to relax, right? The moon here, the queen, doesn't work as hard as the sun, right? So you'll see these people, they had a very comfortable life, right? Growing up, they didn't have to do much at all, right? They're so used to living just in comfort that even growing up, it could be a little tricky, right? That, asking them to do any chores when they're grown up might be a bit difficult because they're just so used to everybody else taking care of everything, right? But they would have had a great childhood. If you ask them about their childhood, they said they love their childhood. You'll even see these people, they'll say that they're very emotionally attached to their childhood, right? The childhood neighborhood, you'll see these people, they'll say that they absolutely love their childhood neighborhood and they'll want to go visit their old neighborhood all the time. Like they'll like to take walks down memory lane, just going down the street, and they'll feel so much nostalgia. Right, so you'll see they're so emotionally attached to everything. They'll tell you stories. They'll say that, I used to walk down this street and then go play on the park, and when we were done, we'd go buy some ice cream or some chocolate from like a nearby store, right? They're so attached and they love their childhood, right? It like this part they'll never forget, right? Because they'll have only fond memories of their childhood, right? It's as if their childhood is defining their whole life, right? Like they absolutely like they're so focused on it, right? Because it means so much to them, right? Um, so you see as well, this is a very good neighborhood that they live in, right? Also, again, it is a rich neighborhood. I would say that this is a bit more rich of a neighborhood than Sun, right? So Sun in 10th. I would say Moon makes it more rich, right? Um, you'll see that they'll even be very fond of like the kids on the street and uh right? They'll remember all the details of all the houses and everything, right? So they'll be very fond of everything. You'll see they'll get very emotional when they say like, oh, they're gonna tear down an old park or an old building in their neighborhood. You'll see it'll really affect these guys. They'll say, I really loved it. They'll literally say it's as if a part of me is dying when they see an old building or something from their old neighborhood get torn down and rebuilt, right? Because they're just so emotionally connected to it, right? But they would have had a great childhood. They would have grown up rich, good neighborhood, uh, as well, right? Just know this doesn't apply if there are malefics here, right? So all of this is true, right? If there are malefics, especially Saturn and Ketu here, it doesn't make this as prominent, right? Like Saturn is not a rich planet, and we'll get to Saturn soon, right? But just know there are exceptions to what I'm saying, right? So moving on, so that's Sun, Moon, we did Venus. So let's go on to Mercury here. Mercury. So Mercury here in the 10th house, you'll see that this is a neighborhood that's filled with that's only filled with kids. So these are like new parents who are here, right? Like this is not a street that's filled with just like old people or like grown up kids. Like these like it's not a street that's just filled with like teenagers or people like 1920, right? This is a street that's only filled with kids. Like this is the neighborhood that they're in, right? So a lot of new parents are coming into this type of neighborhood, right? So you'll see in in their neighborhood, you'll see that there's definitely going to be a park, uh, right, with a slide and swing and everything, uh, just in their neighborhood or even on their street. There's going to be definitely a park very nearby. Like they could just walk to the park and get there quickly, right? Like they don't even need to take their bike or they definitely don't need to drive because there will be some form of park here. Like there'll be a place to like a playground nearby, right? You'll also see though there would have been like there could be a mailbox like right next to their house, right? Like not down the street, but like extremely close to their house, right? So as well, these guys, if you ask them about their childhood, what they'll say is that they grew up and all they remember is just playing games, playing sports, playing like going to the park, hanging out with friends, right? Being very social. These guys like they'll remember all the social type things. For example, like playing like I nowadays you'll see that they'll play like a lot of video games and they'll say, yeah, we connected with people worldwide playing World of Warcraft or Minecraft or something, right? Um, so you'll see these people very communicate. They'll remember the games that they grew up playing, right? Whether this be like sport games, outdoor games, right? You'll see these people as well. If you ask them, they would have gone to a lot of like exhibits. For example, growing up, they would have gone to a lot of things like museums or to uh like arcades growing up. They would have gone to a lot of places to have fun, right? Growing up as well, they would have they would have done some type of artistic or musical thing growing up. Now, Mercury has to be in Venus sign to do this. It has to be in Libra or either in Libra, Taurus, or Gemini for Mercury to have been like doing something musical, right? If Mercury was in Gemini here, you'll see that they would have played or they would have read a lot of books growing up. What they'll say, Mercury and Gemini here, they'll say that their whole childhood was just reading books. They would have loved to read a lot of different books. They'll have a huge library. They would have said that they would have went to the library like at least twice, 2 or 3 times a week, and they probably would have read at least like 10 books a week or something like this, right? Um, Even Mercury and other signs, they would have been like they would have liked reading, right? Again, this wouldn't be true if like K2 is aspecting this, right? There are always like exceptions, right? Um, right? So they would have had a very fun childhood, right? They would have done a lot of activities, right? Um, Y- Right, so that's where you'll see Mercury here. Um, Mercury, we saw Mars. All right, so Mars 10th house. Well, you'll see these people growing up. Um, there's a lot of things to say about Mars here. So growing up, these people, they probably played sports, some kind of sport they would have played growing up. Like the parents would have made them play like basketball or like baseball, cricket, something like this. They would have made them play some type of sport, football, something growing up, right? Or American soccer, right? Uh, they would have played something like this growing up, right? Gymnastics, any type of this, right? They would have known for playing so many different activities growing, right? Um, they would say that right now here you have to look at different aspects that are on this Mars, right? Because different aspects really do play a huge role with Mars here, right? So if you have like a planet like Mercury or Venus aspecting Mars or conjunct Mars, right? You'll see that these people they would have played some if Mars Venus here, they would have done some type of competitive music thing growing up, right? For example, Mars Venus in Gemini, right? You'll see that they would have done some type of competitive music, like competitive piano, for example, right? Or competitive dance, right? Something similar to that, right? Um, right. Let's see here. If it's Sun Mars combination or Mars in Leo, you'll see these people, they would have been very, like, extremely responsible. Like, they probably would have been home alone, like, all the time, especially if, like, Saturn and Ketu aspects. They probably would have been home alone all the time, but they would have taken care of everything around the house, right? They would get everything done. They would do all the chores around. They would fix things around the house. They would, take care of the garden outside, right? If there are good aspects on this Mars, right? But Mars Sun, or Mars in like in Leo, they would have taken care of all the responsibilities. They would, sweep the kitchen, they would do all the dishes, they would do all these things, right? They would answer the door for everyone, right? They really would like as they say, hold down the fort, right? So that's Mars, right? If if this Mars is in Aries or aspected by Rahu in any way, like for example, if Rahu is over here, right? Then Rahu aspects Mars, you'll see that these people, they would have been very aggressive growing up. These people, they would have uh they would have had some anger issues growing up, right? Especially if Rahu aspects this Mars and this Mars is in Aries or Mars is in Scorpio, right? Either one here, you'll see these people, they would have been a very angry child growing up, right? And actually, some kind of combination like this, if there is Saturn involved in this type of combination, for example, like Saturn's conjunct over here, or Saturn is aspecting, like here's Saturn aspects, right? So in any case like this, right, where Rahu, there's the energy of Rahu, Saturn, and Mars, there would have been some type of like domestic violence growing up, right? There would have been some form of like abuse growing up. They would have had, if there's so many malefics aspecting this 10th house, they would have had a very terrible and very rough childhood, right? Uh, and this is assuming that there's no like aspect of Jupiter or Venus, because Jupiter Venus will save this combination, but if there's only malefics, they would have had a very rough childhood and they would have had to have like fended for themselves, right? Uh, yeah. So that's Mars, right? Also with Mars, in their neighborhood would have been, you'll see that they like the grass is always well kept and the trees are always like trimmed very well, right? So it's very well maintained. Like the wildlife is very well maintained around them, right? They'll do that. All the parks, like the grass is always cut. Uh, there's no like weeds or bushes or like big form of something like that, like bushes that are around. It would be very well maintained in that sort, right? Um, Again, if in that same case of Rahu aspects this Mars, again, if there's so many malefics that are aspecting this, like here Saturn again aspects this Mars, right? If there's so many malefics, then know that the neighborhood would have been it would have been a very messed up childhood. This would have been like a gang neighborhood. Like they would have grown up, there would have been gangs nearby or shootings nearby, right? Especially this Rahu aspect in this Mars here. Like there would have been shootings nearby. They would say like, oh yeah, there was like crime or shootings or like theft that happened nearby, right? So that's what happens when there's like a lot of malefics aspecting, but if there are benefics aspecting here, then you'll see like Venus or Jupiter aspecting this Mars, or even Moon aspecting this Mars, you'll see that it would have been very well, the landscape would have been very well kept, right? And here, even Mars, you'll see that this neighborhood, the difference is there are a lot more teenagers, not kids, like teenagers, kids in like their 15, 16, 17, right? Even like early 20, like 19, 20, 21, right? So that's the type of neighborhood that they would have grown up in, right? So we covered that. So let's go to Jupiter, right? So Jupiter over here, what you would have seen, they would have grown up, what they'll say is they would have went to church or the temple or the mosque. They would have went to like doing like some type of religious thing a lot in their childhood, right? Um so in that sense, like what they're gonna remember is a lot of the religious ceremonies that they grew up doing. Like they would say that their parents always went to church or they always went to the temple and contributed and did things around, right? You'll even if you ask these people, right, especially if this is in Sagittarius or Leo, right? What you'll see is that these people growing up, they contributed somehow. Like they helped out at the temple all the time as a kid. You'll see that they would have been at the temple a lot, and it would have like really like that temple that they've been to really molded their childhood, right? So that's what you would have seen, right? This uh this neighborhood, it would have been there would be like very big trees in their neighborhood. Even in their backyard, there could have been a very big tree that was there, or a big tree or big bush, right? Something very big would have been there, right? Um this neighborhood, Also around in this neighborhood, there would have been like a temple or church that's like very nearby in walking distance, right? Um, in walking distance nearby, they would have had this, right? Um, This neighborhood also, it's a very good neighborhood, right? You'll see that there could be some old people or even people in like their 40s, 50s, but these people have a lot more experience and they're very wise, right? So again, this is not a neighborhood where it's like little kids, like there are only little kids who are running around or teenagers, right? What you would have seen is that this neighborhood uh was filled with a bit more older people or people who gave like a lot of wisdom, right? Uh, that's what would have been in this neighborhood, right? Their childhood as well, they would have grown up like studying, maybe not like studying in the conventional way that's, all they did is just go to after school programs, but they would have done a lot of things to, like every summer, they would have done things to learn more and more knowledge, right? They probably would have went to like a camp or something to learn more things, maybe like a religious camp or something to like learn more topics at school, right? But they would have done a lot of learning, right? Growing up, they would have been known as like a very intelligent kid, right? Um, Even if you ask their parents would have said, yes, this person is very intelligent, right? It's growing up, like he was very wise, right? So that's Jupiter. Now three left. Saturn, let's do Saturn here, right? So Saturn. So with Saturn, what you'll see is that these people, their neighborhood would have been filled with just old people. Like there would have been a lot of elderly people on this neighborhood. Like you'll even see, they'll talk about how they would always see like an old guy or an old couple walking down the streets, or seeing an old couple just on their porch or in front of their house or something, right? Or outside, right? There will always be some type of uh like old people nearby. This is not a neighborhood that's filled with kids or like teenagers. It is a neighborhood that's known for having a lot of older people, right? A lot of people who are retired, right? Um, this neighborhood, they would have struggled growing up. Growing up, they would have had to, like, even if they went to a store and they would have asked for, can I have this toy? Like their parents wouldn't have had enough money to always buy them every single thing that they wanted. You'll see that these people growing up, they would have gotten like a gift for like a special occasion like Christmas or whatever other like type of holiday. Like this is where they would have really gotten their toys. Like they wouldn't have gotten, very, very rarely would they have gotten like a toy um like easily, like from their parents, right? So these guys really know the struggle of, not getting everything. And actually because of this, whatever they had, they really cherished it, right? Like these people, they probably got like a bicycle a lot later in life than a lot of the other kids, right? Like a lot of kids started like getting their own bikes at like 5, 6, 7 years old. You'll see these people, they probably would have gotten a bicycle at like 10 years old, 10 or 11, right? So they would have gotten things like that a lot later, but you'll see these guys, they really cherish every single thing that they get. Like every toy that they get, even their bike that they get, they'll really hold on to it for a long time, right? Like they would have gotten like a cheaper bike or something, and it could be completely worn out, and their toys could be completely worn out, right? But they would have really cherished it. And uh, even if you tell these people, like at school, like these people, like they would have had all these things, but and like their friends would have made like fun of them. They would have said like, "Wow, your toys are all like broken or like tattered," right? But these kids like they have like such a connection to these toys because they really held on to it for a long time, right? So that's what you would have seen, right? Uh, they really didn't get like everything that they wanted. Uh, and they really did struggle, right? If the Saturn is aspected by a lot more malefics, like for example, Ketu here, like if Ketu aspects the Saturn or is conjunct with Saturn, right? You'll see these people, they th in their childhood, they said that they would have been alone all the time. They had to play alone. They had no friends or no company. Like their parents were always away, right? They had nobody with them. And so Saturn K2, you'll see these people, they had to learn to entertain themselves, right? So these people, because of that, even when they grow up, they're perfectly fine being alone because that's how they grew up. They had to be alone and they had to find ways to entertain themselves, right? Um, right. So if Rahu or Mars aspects this, very similar to what I had said before with Mars, is that Saturn or Mars and Rahu, if they aspect this combination, then you'd see that their neighborhood, there would have again it would have been so poor and there would have been robberies or like gangs as well everywhere, right? Shootings. This would be like a very run down neighborhood. This neighborhood, it will not be well maintained. Uh, you'll see that there would have been like graffiti everywhere, right? Graffiti on the walls. It would be a very run down, like run down neighborhood, right? Um, if aspected by benefics, right, like Jupiter, Venus, even Moon, right, you'll see these people that um, they it did take them a long time to get like a shiny new bike, right? Like it won't be denied to get a bike, but once they get it, that bike will be a very good quality, right? Like especially Venus aspecting this Jupiter or Venus aspecting the Saturn, right? Uh, It would have taken them a long time, but once they get their bike, it would have been a good quality one, right? So Benefix here, it makes it a lot more like they just had to wait a lot longer to get everything, right? But they definitely did get it in the end, right? If Malefic's aspect this like K2, then they never got anything, right? They never got any toys. They were the only people at school and growing up in the neighborhood who just didn't have like anything, right? So they had to really entertain themselves, right? Now the last two, Rahu Saturn or Rahu Ketu, right? So Rahu over here, right? Rahu, this neighborhood would have been very odd, right? Something about this neighborhood would have been very different than like the neighborhood that you grew up in. You'll see that these people growing up, like um there would have been something very like even their playground that would have been nearby, uh it would have been very weird looking. It would have been very different looking. They would have like weird looking stairs, like stairs that would have been designed that looked very like different. There would have been like different attractions there at that park that like looked very odd. It wouldn't be typical stairs or typical monkey bars. It would have been very weird and different type of games that you would see there, right? So Rahu as well, these guys, they got a lot of things growing up, right? Uh right? Like these guys, they didn't have to like struggle with food unless has the energy of Saturn associated with this in any way, right? Like these people, they always had resources. Like they always had food and like grains and like all of these things. You'll see when if you ask these guys when they went grocery shopping, they would have brought back huge bags of like rice or like the giga or mega bags of like potatoes or anything, right? They would have brought things home in like big quantities. So things would have been in big quantities around the house, right? Something in their house would have been very big as well. They could have had a big house. The house itself could have been big, or you'll see that something in their house would have been very big. There could have been like a big tree at the front, right, as well. Um, right? Like for example, a good example of this, if you see Rahu's sun, then when you walk inside their house, there would have been a giant chandelier, right? Like a chandelier that had like a lot of like mirrors or things like glass that will reflect the light, right? You'll see something huge like that when you walk into their house, right? Um, right? If it's like Rahu Mercury, you would have seen a giant bookcase in their house growing up, right? Uh, Rahu Venus, you would have seen Rahu Venus here. Let me say Rahu Venus Moon. You would have seen their parents would have had like a very big wine cabinet, right? Wine cabinet or alcohol cabinet. They would have a big collection of that on display in their house, right? Rahu Venus itself, like Rahu Venus or like even Rahu in Libra or Taurus, they would have had like a big uh a giant uh a giant thing to keep hold like makeup or like colognes or something like this. This would have been in probably in someone's room or in some corner, but there would have been like a place that had these, right? So if this is aspected by benefics, Jupiter, Venus, Moon, right, you would see that their childhood, they would have gotten everything, right? They would have gotten everything and in big quantities. If this is aspected by malefics, right, Saturn, Mars here, right, then you would see that their childhood, they really would have struggled. It would have been a very bad neighborhood. It would have been a rundown neighborhood. Um, this is the type of neighborhood you'll see people who do like drugs on the street, right? If there are malefics that aspect this Rahu, right? Uh, even even if it's just Rahu alone, right? You'll see that there still would have been people who like smoked or drank on the growing up. Like they would have known somebody on the street who would drink or smoke a lot, right? So that's Rahu, and the last one is Ketu, right? So Ketu over here, these guys, you'll see that what you'll hear these people say is that they don't remember too much of their childhood. You'll see that these guys like maybe like their mom or dad will tell them something and they'll be like, "Oh, do you remember when we went to the zoo or when we went to visit these people one time in their childhood?" And they'll be like, "No, I don't remember these kind of things happening." Right? These guys, they would have forgotten a lot of their childhood. Even if a lot of significant things happened, they like their childhood just isn't like something memorable or something that really like strikes them, right? Like they'll very rarely talk about their childhood. These people, right? K2 tenth, like your spouse will very rarely talk about the things he did in his childhood. Even if you bring up the conversation with them, they're not going to say too much about like they won't have much to say. Like they'll be like, "Oh, did you play any sports?" They'll be like, "No." And that's the end of the sentence, right? Like did you do this or that? They'll be like, no, I didn't do much, right? Like these guys also as well, K2, especially if in Saturn signs, they would have been alone a lot of the time, right? Even just K2 alone here, right? Like they didn't go out too much, they didn't have too many trips, or they didn't go traveling too much. They were mostly to themselves, and it was like a very like quiet childhood, right? You'll see in their house growing up, there always would have been something broken in their house. And if you ask them, they would have said, yeah, growing up, they always had to get this part of this thing repaired. Like this part of the house was there's going to be a part of the house where something is always kept breaking, and that they would have remembered. They would have remembered, oh yes, this thing, we like every year we had to keep getting this thing repaired, right? Um, the neighborhood, this neighborhood, it would have been in like a very uneven neighborhood. Like it wouldn't be like completely flat ground. It would have been lopsided. Even you'll see their backyard or their front yard, uh it would have been uneven. It would have been like slanting, or there would have been like a break in the ground or something like this, right? So it's like very uneven, right? This is what you would have seen. Even the neighborhood itself, it's not like a flat land for like the whole like little village. Like it would have been like tilted, or it would have been, uh, or there would have been some type of like gradient in the soil, right? Um, right? Some unevenness in the soil, right? So that's what you'll see with K2 in the 10th house, right? So hopefully this covers all the planets here. Please make sure to like, subscribe. If you have any questions or doubts, right, leave them in the comments below. And yes, thank you.